I found a key to a secret house my husband never told me about, and when I used it, I realized our entire lavish life was a twisted lie built on something far darker than an affair. It didn't happen while I was snooping. I want to make that clear right away. I'm not the jealous type, and I've never been the type of girl who goes through her partner's phone while he's in the shower. I trusted Oliver. I trusted him with my life, my rent, my future, everything. When you're 19 and a 38-year-old international consultant sweeps you off your feet, moves you into a penthouse, and tells you that you're the only person who truly understands his soul, you tend to wear rose-colored glasses. We aren't legally married. Oliver doesn't believe in government paper. He says we are spiritually bound, which sounded romantic 6 months ago, but now just sounds convenient for him. The discovery happened because of a cheap zipper on an expensive bag. Oliver was packing for another urgent trip to Dubai. That's where he says his main clients are. He's usually gone for a week at a time, maybe once a month. I hate the trips. The penthouse feels massive and cold when he's not there, and he gets weirdly distant with his texting. But he pays for everything. My clothes, the car, the food, the apartment. So who was I to complain about him working hard to sustain our lifestyle? He was frantic that morning. He'd overslept, his alarm hadn't gone off, and his driver was already idling downstairs. He was shoving tailored suits into his black leather weekender bag with a level of aggression that made me nervous. "Paige, baby, have you seen my charger?" he yelled from the bathroom. "It's by the bed, Ollie," I called back, walking into the closet to grab his shoes. I heard a curse word, a loud ripping sound, and then a heavy sigh. I walked out to find him staring at the weekender bag. In his haste to zip it shut over a stack of files, the interior silk lining had caught in the teeth of the zipper and torn wide open. It wasn't a small tear. The entire bottom of the lining had come away from the leather shell. "Leave it," he snapped, grabbing a different suitcase from the top shelf. "I don't have time. Just take it to the cobbler while I'm gone. Get it fixed." He threw the clothes into the new bag, kissed me on the forehead, a hard, distracted kiss, and ran out the door. I stood there in the silence of the apartment for a moment, listening to the elevator ding as he descended to the lobby. Then I looked at the ruined bag on the bed. I'm a distinctively curious person, but not usually suspicious. I reached into the bag to empty it out so I could take it to the repair shop later. I pulled out a stray sock he'd missed, and some lint. But as I ran my hand along the bottom, between the torn silk lining and the hard leather shell, my fingers brushed against something cold. It wasn't loose. It was taped down. I frowned, peeling back the ripped fabric. Duct taped to the structural cardboard at the bottom of the bag was a key. It wasn't a normal house key. It looked heavy, old-fashioned, made of iron with a rounded bow, but it had a very modern, plastic, aggressively yellow tag attached to it. I peeled the tape off and held it up to the light. Written on the yellow tag in permanent marker, in handwriting that was definitely not Oliver's, was an address. 42 Blackwood Lane. I froze. I knew Blackwood Lane. Everyone in our city knows Blackwood Lane. It's not in Dubai. It's not in London or Tokyo or any of the places Oliver consults. It's 40 minutes north of here. It's an ultra-secluded, old money district where the driveways are half a mile long and the trees are so thick you can't see the houses from the road. It's where the local billionaires and recluses live. Why would Oliver, who claims to have no family left and hates the suburbs, have a hidden key to a mansion 40 minutes away? And why was it taped inside the lining of a suitcase he only uses for international travel? My stomach did a slow, sick somersault. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. I typed the address into Google Maps. No street view available, of course. I switched to satellite view. The property was massive, a gray roof almost entirely consumed by forest. There was a long, winding driveway leading to a detached garage and a main house that looked like something out of a Gothic novel. My thumb hovered over the call button for Oliver. I wanted to ask him. I wanted to laugh and say, "Hey, you forgot your secret dungeon key." But I didn't call him. Instead, I called Kelly. Kelly is my best friend from high school. She's the only one who didn't cut me off when I moved in with Oliver. She hates him, but she tolerates him for my sake. "He's cheating," Kelly said immediately, her voice tinny through the speaker. "Paige, I've told you. A guy that rich, that old, with no ring on your finger, he has a wife. That key is to his real house. You're the side piece." "He's not married, Kel," I argued, though my voice lacked conviction. "I've seen his passport, I've met his business partners, and he's with me 24/7 when he's in town. If he had a wife 40 minutes away, wouldn't he go there at night? Maybe she travels. Maybe she's in a coma. I don't know, Paige. But normal people don't sew keys into the lining of their luggage." She was right. That was the part I couldn't get past. The concealment. "I'm going to go there," I said. "What? No. You watch too many true crime docs. What if his wife is there? What if she has a gun? He's on a plane to Dubai, Kelly. His flight took off 10 minutes ago. If that is his house, it's empty right now. I just want to see it. I just want to drive by. Paige, this is a bad idea. I have to know." I hung up before she could talk me out of it. I grabbed my purse and the heavy iron key. I took the Audi Q8 Oliver bought for me. Technically, it's leased in his company's name, and headed for the highway. The drive was agonizing. Every worst-case scenario played out in my head. Scenario A. I pull up and see a minivan and a swing set. He has a wife and 3 kids. Scenario B. It's a stash house for drugs. Scenario C. It's nothing. He's holding the key for a friend. But deep down, I knew it was none of those. Oliver is possessive. He's obsessive about order and control. He doesn't do favors for friends. This was his secret. As I turned off the main highway and onto the winding roads leading toward Blackwood Lane, the reception on my phone dropped to 1 bar. The trees here were ancient oaks, their branches almost creating a tunnel over the road that blocked out the midday sun. It instantly felt 10 degrees colder. The GPS voice was the only sound in the car. In 200 feet, turn right. I turned. Blackwood Lane was barely a road. It was a paved path through dense forest. I passed a few gated driveways, but the houses were invisible behind stone walls and hedges. Then, the GPS said, "You have arrived." I slowed the car to a crawl. Number 42. There was no house visible, just a massive, rusted iron gate that looked like it hadn't been painted in 20 years. The stone pillars on either side were covered in ivy. A no trespassing sign was nailed to a tree, half consumed by the bark. I sat there, idling. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. It looks abandoned, I thought. Maybe he bought it as an investment property. But if it was an investment, why hide the key? Why never mention it when we talk about our future dream home? I looked at the passenger seat where the iron key sat. It looked old. The gate looked old. I rolled down my window. The air smelled like pine needles and damp earth. It was dead silent. No birds, no traffic, just the hum of my engine. I shouldn't do this. I should turn around, go home, wait for him to call from Dubai, and ask him casually. But I couldn't. The curiosity was a physical itch I couldn't scratch. I put the car in park, leaving the engine running. I grabbed the key. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it in the dirt as I stepped out of the car. I walked up to the pedestrian door built into the massive main gate. It had a heavy antique lock. I slid the key in. It moved with a gritty resistance, like it hadn't been used in a while. I applied pressure. Click. The sound echoed in the quiet woods like a gunshot. The lock turned. I pushed the heavy iron door. It groaned on its hinges, swinging open just enough for me to slip through. I stepped inside. The driveway continued upward, disappearing around a bend of overgrown rhododendrons. I walked a few steps, my boots crunching on gravel that was littered with dead leaves. I rounded the bend, and there it was. It wasn't just a house, it was an estate. A sprawling Victorian-style mansion with turrets and dark windows that looked like hollow eyes. It was magnificent and terrifying. But what stopped me in my tracks wasn't the architecture. It was the condition. The grass was knee-high, vines were crawling up the brickwork, reaching for the second-story windows. It looked completely abandoned, except for one thing. Parked in front of the detached garage, shiny and pristine against the backdrop of decay, was a car, and I recognized it immediately. It was a silver Porsche 911, the exact same car Oliver told me he sold 6 months ago because the maintenance was too high. I felt the blood drain from my face. He hadn't sold it. It was here, and if the car was here, was he? I checked my phone. No signal. I took a step toward the garage, my breath catching in my throat. I needed to see inside that car. I needed to know if the engine was warm. I crept forward, the silence of the estate pressing down on me. I reached the Porsche and placed my hand on the hood. It was cold. Stone cold. Okay, he wasn't here. He really was in Dubai. He just kept his old car here. Why lie about selling it? I looked at the garage. It had a side door. I looked at the key in my hand. It was a master key. Usually these old skeleton keys worked on all the doors of an estate. I tried the door handle. Locked. I inserted the key. Click. The door swung inward into darkness. The smell hit me instantly. Not the smell of oil or gasoline, but something chemical, like developer fluid or bleach. I pulled my phone out and turned on the flashlight, stepping into the garage. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The beam of light cut through the dark. It swept across a workbench, and that's when I saw it. The walls of the garage were covered, plastered. Not with tools, not with calendars. They were covered with photos, hundreds of them. I stepped closer, the light shaking in my hand. They were candid photos, taken from a distance. Photos of women walking down the street, sitting in cafes, waiting at bus stops. I scanned them frantically, looking for my own face, looking for Kelly, looking for a secret wife. But they weren't of me. They were of strangers. But they all had one thing in common. Every single woman in these photos had long, wavy auburn hair, just like mine. And in the center of the workbench, sitting on a styrofoam head, was a wig. A custom human hair wig, in my exact shade of red. I reached out to touch it, my brain screaming at me to run, to get out, to leave right now. But before my fingers could graze the hair, I heard it. The sound of gravel crunching outside. A car was coming up the driveway. I froze. I killed the flashlight. Through the dirty window of the garage, I saw headlights sweep across the overgrown lawn. A black SUV pulled up next to the Porsche. It wasn't a taxi. It wasn't a police car. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. It was Oliver. He wasn't in Dubai, and he wasn't wearing his suit. He was wearing blue medical scrubs. I clamped my hand over my mouth to stop the scream, backing into the shadows of the garage as he walked toward the trunk of his car and pulled out a wheelchair. I backed deeper into the garage, my heart hammering so hard against my ribs, I was sure Oliver could hear it through the walls. I scrambled up a narrow, dusty wooden staircase that led to a storage loft above the main garage floor. I dove behind a stack of rotting cardboard boxes just as the garage door creaked open. But it wasn't Oliver. Not yet. From my vantage point in the loft, peering through a gap in the floorboards, I could see the driveway through the dirty window. Oliver was still standing by his SUV. A white van pulled up behind him. It had a logo on the side, Guardian Home Health and Hospice. A sturdy woman in a nurse's uniform uniform hopped out. She didn't hug Oliver. She didn't greet him like a friend. She handed him a clipboard and pointed at the house with an air of annoyance. "You're late, Mr. Sterling," I heard her say. Her voice was muffled but audible through the single-pane glass. "We can't keep the shift rotation if you aren't here to relieve the night nurse on time." Mr. Sterling? That wasn't Oliver's last name. We were the Cunninghams, or at least he was. "Traffic was a nightmare, Brenda. I'm sorry," Oliver said. His voice, it wasn't the commanding, smooth baritone he used with waiters or his clients. It was meek, apologetic, subservient. He looked down at his scrubs. "I'll go in and get her settled. Did she eat?" "Barely," Brenda said, marching back to her van. "She's been asking for Molly again. It's a bad day. Good luck." Brenda drove off. Oliver stood there for a moment, shoulders slumped, looking exhausted. He looked at the main house with a mixture of dread and devotion. Then, he grabbed the wheelchair from his trunk, piled it with bags of groceries, generic brand, not the Whole Foods stuff we bought, and wheeled it up the ramp to the main house. He disappeared inside. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 10 minutes. He's a nurse. The thought ricocheted around my brain. My multi-millionaire international consultant boyfriend is a hospice nurse named Mr. Sterling? It didn't make sense. The penthouse, the Q8, the designer clothes, a nurse's salary couldn't cover a fraction of our life. Unless he was stealing from his patients. Was he scamming old people? I needed to leave. I needed to get out of here before he came back. But as I turned to crawl toward the loft ladder, my elbow knocked over a small tin can on a shelf next to me. It clattered against the wood. I froze, waiting for a shout from the house. Silence. I carefully picked up the tin. It was old, rusted, but inside there were photos. I pulled them out, squinting in the dim light coming from the roof vent. They weren't candid street photos like the ones downstairs. These were old, 90s-style film prints. They showed a young girl, maybe 18 or 19. She was beautiful. Pale skin, wide eyes, and that distinct wavy auburn hair. My hair. In one photo, she was wearing a blue floral sundress. I looked down at myself. I own a blue floral sundress, almost exactly like that. Oliver bought it for me for our 3-month anniversary. He'd said, "I saw it in a vintage shop window and thought of you." In another photo, she was laughing, holding a vanilla ice cream cone. "I only like vanilla," Oliver always insisted when we got dessert. "It's classic, just like you." I flipped the photo over. Written on the back in faded ink, "Molly, 1999. A chill that had nothing to do with the drafty garage seized my spine. Brenda the nurse had said, "She's been asking for Molly again." This wasn't just a coincidence. Oliver wasn't just attracted to a type. He was curating me. The clothes he bought, the way he asked me to wear my hair, the specific perfumes he gifted me. They were all here in these photos of a dead or missing girl named Molly. I felt sick. Violator. I felt like a doll in a collection. Suddenly, the side door of the garage opened below me. I pressed my face into the dust of the floorboards, holding my breath. Oliver walked in. He had shed the scrub top and was wearing a white t-shirt. He walked over to the workbench, the one with the wig. He didn't look at the photos of the strangers. He went straight to a small mini fridge tucked under the bench that I hadn't noticed before. He pulled out a bottle of water and chugged it. Then, he did something that made my blood run cold. He picked up the wig. He stroked it, gently, almost lovingly. Then he leaned in and buried his face in the hair, inhaling deeply. "Soon," he whispered, "almost perfect." He set the wig down and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. A second later, the phone in my pocket buzzed. ZZZT, ZZZT. I had it on silent, but the vibration against the wooden floorboard sounded like a jackhammer in the quiet garage. Oliver froze. His head snapped up, looking toward the ceiling. "Hello?" he called out. His voice was sharp now. The Mr. Sterling meekness was gone. This was the Oliver I knew, the dangerous one. I grabbed my phone, jamming my thumb onto the volume button to kill the call, praying he thought it was a rat or a settling beam. He took a step toward the ladder. "Is someone there?" He put a hand on the ladder rung. The wood creaked. I looked around frantically. There was a hayloft door at the back of the loft, about 10 feet up from the ground outside. It was latched shut with a rusty hook. If I opened it, the light would flood in. He would see me. But if I stayed, he would find me. Oliver took the first step up the ladder. I didn't think. I scrambled backward, keeping low, moving as silently as I could toward the hayloft door. Step, step. He was coming up. I reached the door. The latch was stiff. I used both hands, forcing the metal hook up. It gave way with a screech of metal on metal. "Hey!" Oliver shouted, surging up the ladder now. I kicked the door open. Sunlight blinded me. It was a drop, maybe 12 feet to a patch of overgrown bushes. I didn't hesitate. I jumped. I hit the bushes hard, branches scratching my face and arms, and rolled onto the grass. The wind was knocked out of me, but adrenaline is a powerful drug. I scrambled to my feet. I looked back up at the loft door. Oliver's face appeared in the opening, his eyes wide, scanning the yard, but I was already sprinting. I kept to the side of the garage, out of his line of sight, ducking under the overgrown rhododendrons. I reached my car. I threw myself into the driver's seat. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the key into the footwell. "No, no, no," I whimpered, groping for it. I found it. I jammed it into the ignition. The engine roared to life. I didn't look back to see if he was chasing me. I threw the Q8 into reverse, tires spinning on the gravel, and tore down the driveway. driveway. I squeezed through the iron gate I'd left ajar and fishtailed onto Blackwood Lane. I drove like a maniac for 10 miles until I hit the main highway. Only then did I slow down to the speed limit, gasping for air, checking my rearview mirror every 3 seconds. My phone rang again. Oliver calling. I stared at the screen. If I didn't answer, he would know. He would know I was the one in the garage. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. I answered. "Hey, baby," I said. My voice sounded thin, reedy. "Paige?" The connection was crackly. He had put on a fake background noise track, the hum of an airplane cabin. "Sorry I missed you earlier. The Wi-Fi on this flight is terrible." He wasn't chasing me. He didn't know it was me. He thought I was at home. He must have assumed the noise in the garage was a raccoon or a trespasser who got away. "It's okay," I said, tears streaming down my face. Are you in the air?" "Yeah, just over the Atlantic," he lied, smoothly, easily. "I'm going to try to sleep. I just wanted to tell you I love you, and I was thinking about you. Make sure you wear that blue floral dress tonight. I like imagining you in it." I looked down at my scratched arms, the dirt on my jeans. "Okay, Oliver," I whispered. "I'll wear it." "Good girl. I'll call you when I land." He hung up. I pulled over to the side of the highway and vomited onto the asphalt. He wasn't in Dubai. He was 40 minutes away, nursing an invalid woman and obsessed with a dead girl named Molly, and I was the replacement. But the question wasn't just who Molly was. The question was, where is the money coming from? If he's a nurse, how is he paying for the penthouse? I looked at the photos I had shoved into my pocket before jumping. The one of Molly, and then I realized something I had missed in the dark garage. In the background of the photo of Molly eating ice cream, there was a car, a vintage Rolls-Royce, and standing next to it, holding the door open, was a man in a chauffeur's uniform. It was a young Oliver. He wasn't a nurse, and he wasn't the son. He was the help, and he had been playing the long con for 20 years. I wiped my mouth, put the car in drive, and merged back onto the highway. I wasn't going home to cry. I was going to find out who the hell Mr. Sterling was, and who was the woman in the wheelchair paying for my life. Because now I knew I wasn't his girlfriend. I was in prop in a stolen life. I drove home in a daze, the Q8 feeling less like a luxury car and more like a rolling evidence locker. When I got back to the penthouse, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of our walk-in closet, surrounded by the things Oliver had bought me. The Prada bags, the Louboutins, the diamond tennis bracelet. I looked at them with new eyes. If Oliver wasn't a high-powered consultant, and if he was actually just a caretaker or a nurse named Mr. Sterling for an invalid woman in a decaying mansion, where did the money come from? I googled private nurse salary. Even at the high end, it was roughly $80,000 a year. Our rent alone was $12,000 a month. The math was terrifyingly simple. He was taking it, he was draining that old woman's accounts, he was living a double life. Humble servant by day, playboy millionaire by night, using her fortune, and I was the accessory. I spent the next 3 days acting. I had to be the perfect, naive Paige. When Oliver called from Dubai, I cooed and asked about the weather. I sent him selfies in the blue floral dress, suppressing the nausea rising in my throat every time I hit send. He came home on a Tuesday. I heard the key turn in the lock and forced a smile onto my face. "I'm home," he announced, dropping his bags. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes. Being Mr. Sterling must have been exhausting. "Ollie!" I ran to him, throwing my arms around his neck. I smelled him. Underneath his expensive cologne, I caught a faint whiff of that chemical cleaner smell I'd encountered in the garage. "I missed you. Missed you too, baby," he said, squeezing me a little too tight. "I got you something." He reached into his carry-on, the new one, not the one with the torn lining, and pulled out a small box. It was a bottle of perfume, Shalimar. "Duty-free," he said with a grin. "I know you like the sweet stuff." I took the box. It felt gritty. "Thank you," I said, kissing his cheek. I took it into the bathroom and locked the door. I inspected the box. There was no cellophane wrapper. The corners of the cardboard were soft, worn white from age. I opened it. The glass bottle inside was heavy, beautiful, and half full. The liquid was dark, amber-colored, thick like syrup. New perfume is pale gold. This was vintage, decades old. I looked at the bottom of the bottle. There was a batch code etched into the glass, 8904. I pulled out my phone and searched cosmetic batch code checker. Production date, April 1999. He hadn't bought this at duty free. He had taken this off of vanity in that rotting house. This was Molly's perfume. He was dressing me in a missing girl's clothes and scenting me with her 26-year-old perfume. My hands shook as I set the bottle down. He wasn't just a thief. He was trying to replace someone, and I was the vessel. I knew I couldn't just leave. If I left, he'd find me. He had trackers on the car. He probably had cameras in the apartment I didn't know about. And if I went to the authorities with just a hunch and a half-used bottle of perfume, they wouldn't take it seriously. I needed proof of the financial fraud. I needed to catch him in the act, record it, and then go to the police. I needed to go back to Blackwood Lane. The opportunity came 2 days later. "I have a board meeting tonight," Oliver said, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "It's going to run late. Don't wait up." "Okay," I said from the bed, watching him. "Good luck, babe." As soon as the door clicked shut, I was moving. I didn't take the Q8. I knew he checked the mileage. I called Kelly. "I need your car," I told her. "No questions, please." Kelly, bless her heart, didn't argue. She drove her beat-up Honda Civic to the back alley behind my building. I ran down the fire escape stairs to avoid the doorman seeing me leave without Oliver. "If I'm not back by midnight," I told Kelly, handing her a sealed envelope, "open this. It has the address and everything I know. Call for help." "Paige, you're scaring me," Kelly said, gripping the steering wheel. "I'm scared too," I said. "I love you." through. I took her car and drove north. The drive to Blackwood Lane felt different at night. The darkness was absolute. The trees loomed over the road like skeletal fingers. I parked the Civic a quarter-mile down the road, hidden behind a thicket of bushes. I walked the rest of the way, sticking to the shadows of the tree line. When I reached the gate, number 42, it was open. Just a crack. I slipped through. The estate was even creepier in the dark. The moonlight caught the ivy crawling up the walls of the mansion, making it look like the house was alive. But unlike the last time, the house wasn't dark. The entire ground floor was blazing with light. I crept up the driveway, avoiding the gravel, stepping carefully on the overgrown grass. I reached the side of the house, my heart thudding in my ears. I moved toward a window. The curtains were drawn, but they were sheer, moth-eaten lace. I could see through them. I peered inside. It was a dining room. A massive, formal dining room with a chandelier that had to be worth more than my parents' house. The table was set for dinner. Fine china, crystal glasses, silver candelabras with lit candles, and there was Oliver. He wasn't wearing scrubs. He was wearing a tuxedo, a vintage one with tails. He looked dashing and completely unstable. He was standing at the head of the table, pouring wine. "Is the temperature to your liking, Mother?" he asked. He was speaking to a wheelchair at the far end of the table. I shifted my angle to see. Sitting in the wheelchair was a woman. She was incredibly old, frail, her head resting against the side of the chair. She looked barely conscious, wrapped in a shawl. This had to be Adrina, the owner, the victim. "She says it's perfect, Oliver," he answered for her, changing his voice to a falsetto crackle. "You're such a good boy." "Thank you, Mother," he replied in his normal voice. "I try. I do everything for this family." He took a sip of wine. "And is Molly coming down?" he asked the empty air. My breath hitched. "Oh, yes," he answered himself in the old woman's voice. "She's just finishing her hair. She wants to look pretty for you." "She always looks pretty," Oliver said, his voice dropping to a low, possessive growl. I made sure of that. I felt a scream building in my throat. I clamped my hand over my mouth. He wasn't just stealing. He was staging elaborate plays. He was living out a fantasy where he was the lord of the manor, married to the girl of his dreams, with his doting mother approving of it all. I watched as he checked his watch. "It's time," he said. He walked out of the dining room, heading toward the foyer. This was it. He was distracted. I moved away from the window and circled to the front of the house. The massive oak front doors were there. I needed to get closer. I needed to hear what he was doing. I needed to see Molly. Was she a prisoner? Was there another girl trapped in there? I crept up the stone steps to the porch. Inside, I heard music start, a record player crackling to life. It was a slow, haunting waltz. I pressed my ear to the heavy wood of the door. I heard footsteps, heavy ones, and the sound of something rolling. "There you are, my love," I heard Oliver say. "You look breathtaking." I couldn't stand it anymore. The adrenaline spiked, overriding my fear. If there was a girl in there, I had to help her. If he had kidnapped someone to play the role of Molly, I was the only one who could save her. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the iron key. My hand was trembling so violently, I scratched the finish on the lock plate. I slid the key in. Click. The music inside swelled, a crescendo of violins. I took a deep breath. I turned the handle. The door was heavy, but it swung open silently on well-oiled hinges. I stepped into the foyer. The smell of lilies, funeral flowers, was overpowering. It mixed with the smell of old dust and that sharp metallic scent of floor wax. The music was coming from the room on the right, the dining room. I walked toward the open archway. My boots made no sound on the thick Persian rug. "Shall we dance before the main course?" I heard Oliver ask. I stepped into the doorway. "Oliver?" I said, my voice shaking but loud. The music seemed to screech to a halt, though the record kept spinning. Oliver spun around. He dropped the wine glass he was holding. It shattered on the floor, red wine splashing like blood across the pristine white rug. He stared at me. His face went from shock to a terrifying, blank calmness. The silence in the dining room was heavier than the iron door I had just walked through. The record player kept spinning, the needle scratching against the vinyl in a rhythmic hiss-pop, providing the only soundtrack to the nightmare unfolding in front of me. I stared at the figure sitting next to Oliver. She was terrifyingly realistic. The silicone skin had a subtle texture, pores, and even faint blushing on the cheeks. The eyes were glass, but they caught the candlelight in a way that made them look wet, alive. She was wearing the blue floral dress, my dress, the one Oliver had insisted I wear for our anniversary, the one he said made me look timeless. Now I knew why. He wasn't looking at me when I wore it. He was looking at her. I was just the mannequin he used to check the fit. "You're disrupting, Mother," Oliver said. His voice was calm, eerily level. He picked up his napkin and dabbed at the corner of his mouth, though he hadn't eaten anything. "We have strict rules about dinner etiquette here, Paige. I expected better from you. I spent months training you." Training me? The words hit me like a physical blow. "It's a doll," I whispered, my voice trembling so hard it barely carried across the table. "Oliver, it's a doll. Her name is Molly," he snapped, his eyes flashing with a sudden, sharp anger. He reached out and stroked the synthetic hand resting on the tablecloth. "And she is perfect. She doesn't ask questions. She doesn't rip the lining of my luggage. She doesn't age." He looked at me then, and the look of disgust on his face broke me more than any scream could have. "You, on the other hand," he sighed, gesturing at me with his wine glass, "are flawed. You're messy. You have opinions. You were a necessary step, Paige, but let's be honest, you were just the prototype. I needed a live model to test the wardrobe, to test the scents, to make sure the aesthetic was authentic." I looked at the old woman at the head of the table, Adrina. She let out a low moan, her head lolling against the back of her wheelchair. She looked emaciated. "You're starving her," I said, the realization washing over me. "You're starving her so you can take this house." Oliver laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Adrena is very happy," he said. "She loves having her son home. She loves that I brought Molly back to her. She signed the power of attorney over to Mr. Sterling months ago. When she passes, peacefully, in her sleep of course, the estate transfers to me. And then I won't have to go back to the city. I won't have to pretend to be a consultant anymore. I won't have to deal with you." He stood up slowly. He was tall, and in the tuxedo he looked imposing. He picked up a carving knife from the silver platter in front of him. "But since you're here," he said, testing the edge of the blade with his thumb, "we might as well finish the scene. You're wearing the wrong outfit though. Molly hates it when you wear jeans." He took a step toward me. The spell of terror broke. The survival instinct kicked in. I didn't scream. I grabbed the nearest heavy object, a crystal decanter full of whiskey sitting on the sideboard next to me, and I hurled it at him. It didn't hit him, but it smashed into the table right in front of the Molly doll. Glass shattered everywhere. The whiskey splashed onto the doll's face and the lit candelabra. The alcohol ignited instantly. A sheet of blue and orange flame whooshed up, catching the synthetic hair of the doll. "No!" Oliver screamed. It wasn't a scream of anger. It was a scream of pure, agonizing grief. He dropped the knife and lunged, not at me, but at the doll. He began frantically patting the flames with his bare hands, wailing like a wounded animal. "Molly, no, I've got you." I didn't wait to see if he saved her. I turned and ran. I sprinted back through the foyer, my boots slipping on the polished wood. I heard Oliver roaring behind me, a sound that didn't sound human anymore. "You ruined her. You ruined everything." I burst out the front door and practically flew down the stone steps. The cool night air hit my face, but I couldn't breathe. I scrambled down the driveway, my legs burning. I didn't go to the gate. I knew he could catch me on the straight path. I veered left, diving into the overgrown rhododendrons, plunging into the dark forest. I could hear him on the porch. "Paige, get back here!" I scrambled through the brush, thorns tearing at my clothes and face. I didn't stop until I reached the tree line where I had hidden Kelly's car. I fumbled for the keys, dropping them in the dirt. I sobbed, scrabbling in the mud until my fingers closed around the plastic fob. I threw myself into the Civic, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I peeled out onto the road, I looked back one last time. The mansion was glowing, not from the lights, but from the fire in the dining room. I could see a silhouette in the window. He wasn't chasing me. He was standing there, holding the melting, burning figure in his arms, swaying back and forth as the room around him began to fill with smoke. I drove to the nearest police station. I didn't stop for stop signs. I didn't stop for red lights. The aftermath was a blur of statements, lawyers, and detectives. They found Audrina alive, but barely. The fire department got there in time to save the structure of the house, and they pulled her out of the smoke. She was dehydrated and malnourished. She's in a state care facility now. She doesn't remember who Oliver is. She thinks he's still the chauffeur from 1999. They found Oliver, too. He hadn't tried to escape. When the police entered the dining room, the fire had been extinguished by the sprinkler system. Oliver was sitting on the wet, ruined floor, clutching the charred remains of the silicone doll. He was singing to it. He's currently in a high-security psychiatric facility. He has been charged with fraud, elder abuse, embezzlement, and identity theft. The detectives filled in the blanks for me. Mr. Sterling didn't exist. Oliver was the son of the estate's former maid. He had grown up on the property, watching Audrina's daughter, the real Molly, from afar. He was obsessed with her. When the real Molly moved away and got married 20 years ago, Oliver snapped. He spent the next 2 decades trying to become the kind of wealthy, powerful man he thought she deserved while waiting for his chance to take the house. He didn't want a girlfriend. He wanted a simulation of a memory. I moved out of the penthouse the next day. I left everything. The clothes, the jewelry, the furniture. I didn't want any of it. It was all bought with stolen money, chosen to turn me into a ghost. I live in a small studio now. I drive a used sedan. And every time I meet a guy who seems too perfect, who has too much money and travels too often, I check his luggage. Because sometimes the baggage people carry isn't emotional. Sometimes it's a key to a life they're stealing from someone else.